The math on the title is actually worse than the title suggests. Straight CPI inflation since 2006 Bureau of Labor Statistics. The official numbers puts $500,000 of 2026 money at roughly $332,000 in 2006 purchasing power. But that's the floor. When you adjust for what retirement actually costs, healthcare compounding at nearly double the general inflation rate, Social Security on a confirmed path to insolvency by 2032, and a generation of Americans who are going to live 30 years past 65, $500,000 today, doesn't just behave like 200,000. It sometimes behaves like less. And yet people look at that number, see 6 digits, and feel okay. That's the problem. The number is fine. The ruler it was measured with is broken. Here's what I'm going to walk you through in this video. The 3 mechanisms that have silently eroded what a savings number actually means. The one place the retirement industry has been systematically lying to you for 20 years. And why the psychological relationship most people have with their savings number is the most dangerous financial miscalculation of the 21st century. None of this is complicated. All of it matters. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you something about Social Security that should change how every American between 40 and 60 thinks about retirement planning right now. But before that, I need to introduce the metaphor that's going to run through this entire video. Because once you see it, you'll never look at a savings account the same way again. Picture a yardstick, an old wooden one, the kind with faded numbers painted on in black, 36 inches. You've had it for 20 years. The number 36 is still printed on the end. But the thing you're measuring, let's call it retirement, has been quietly expanding for 2 decades. Not the number on your yardstick, the wall you're trying to measure. And the wall is now 60 inches. The yardstick still says 36. You hold it up and you think you're almost done measuring. You're not. The problem isn't the number on the yardstick. The problem is what it can actually reach. That yardstick is your savings number, and the wall is what it costs to not work for the rest of your life. Let me show you exactly how far behind that yardstick has fallen. $1 in 2006 is equivalent in purchasing power to about $1.66 today. The dollar had an average inflation rate of 2.57% per year between 2006 and today, producing a cumulative price increase of 66.23%. This means that if you had $200,000 sitting in a savings account in 2006, earning 0 interest, which, yes, people did, a dollar today only buys 60.2% of what it could buy back then. So your $200,000 became, in purchasing power terms, about $120,000. You lost $80,000 of real value by doing nothing. Congratulations on your savings account. But here's the thing that wrecks the comfortable version of this story. General inflation, the CPI, is not how retired people actually spend money. Retirees don't spend like the average urban consumer. They spend more on healthcare. They spend more on housing. They spend more on the exact categories where prices have risen the fastest. And the CPI was never designed to measure that. On a per capita basis, total health spending in the United States has increased in the last 5 decades from $353 per year in 1970 to $15,474 per year in 2020. Read that again, $15,474 per year per person in healthcare spending. And health spending per capita increased by 6.1% in 2024 alone, a drop from 6.5% in 2023. That's still more than double what the Federal Reserve targets as healthy annual inflation. And it's the bill your retirement portfolio has to pay for you every year, getting bigger, compounding, regardless of what the stock market does. This is where most retirement planning breaks down immediately. You think the problem is that you didn't save enough dollars. That's true. But the actual problem is that the thing you're saving for keeps getting more expensive faster than your savings can grow. You're not just behind the starting line. The finish line keeps moving. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you what a $500,000 nest egg actually generates per year as retirement income, and what that number looks like next to what you'd actually need to pay your bills. The gap is going to be uncomfortable. But first, let me take you back to 2006 for a minute, because the comparison between then and now is where this whole story lives. back in 2006, the average retirement savings goal, the magic number that financial planners talked about, was somewhere in the range of $500,000 to $600,000. For a middle-class American household, that was the number you were supposed to hit. It felt big, it felt far, people planned around it. And if you had $200,000 saved in 2006, you were sitting at roughly 33 to 40% of your supposed target. That's not great. You were underfunded. But there was a plan, and you were on the lower end of it. Fast forward to today. On average, Americans think they'll need $1.46 million saved to retire comfortably. That's according to the 2026 Northwestern Mutual Planning and Progress Study, which also found that people aren't confident they will have saved enough $1.46 million. And Northwestern Mutual released this study in April, revealing that the average retirement savings goal has surged to $1.46 million. That figure is a $200,000 jump from the prior year. Not from 20 years ago. From 1 year ago, the target jumped $200,000 in 12 months. Now do the math. If you have $500,000 saved in 2026, you have roughly 34% of the stated retirement target. 500,000 divided by 1.46 million equals 34%. In 2006, 200,000 divided by 500,000, also roughly 33 to 40%. Different decades, different numbers, same position. You're sitting at exactly the same relative place on the ladder, 1/3 of the way up, which means the yardstick, the one with $500,000 printed on the end, reaches the same point on the wall that the $200,000 yardstick reached 20 years ago. Nowhere near the top. Almost half, 46% of respondents said they do not expect to be financially prepared for retirement. That's not a fringe opinion. That's nearly half the country. And when you look at actual savings numbers, it gets worse. Currently, retirees have an average of just $288,700 saved. Barely a third of the amount they feel new retirees require. Average. And medians are bleaker. Median retirement savings is much lower, at $87,000, revealing a sizable gap between typical savers and those with higher balances. By the way, hit subscribe if you like the content, otherwise YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. About 29% of retirees say they have no money saved for retirement at all. Not a little, zero. Nearly 1 in 3 people who have already retired have nothing saved. Meanwhile, 92% of retirees say people underestimate how much money is needed to retire comfortably. 92. Not people who haven't retired yet. People who already went through it, who already lived the movie. And almost all of them say, you don't understand what it actually costs. Here is where most people say, okay, but I'm different. I'm planning ahead. I'm on track. And I get that. Most people watching this video are more engaged with their finances than the average American. But let me introduce you to someone who was also more engaged than average. His name is David. He's not a real person, or maybe he's every person you know. David spent 28 years working a corporate job in marketing, maxed his 401k every year from age 30 onward, watched his balance climb. By age 56, he hit the milestone, $500,000 saved. He sent a text to his wife. She sent back a champagne emoji. He felt it. That satisfaction of a number that finally looked substantial. And then David sat down to run the actual retirement math for the first time. He started with what he heard from his advisor, the 4% rule. Take 4% of your savings in year 1. That gives you $20,000 a year from his $500,000. Add Social Security. He's estimated his benefit at $2,070 a month, roughly the current average. That's another $24,840 a year. Total, $44,840. The Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey puts average annual household spending at $78,535 in 2024. David and his wife spend a bit less than average, let's say $62,000. His projected retirement income, $44,000. His gap, $18,000 per year, every year, for potentially 30 years. That's $540,000 in shortfall, assuming nothing changes. David's champagne emoji aged poorly. This is the subplot that doesn't get told enough. $500,000 is a meaningful achievement, genuinely. Vanguard reported that the median retirement plan balance among Americans 65 and over was $95,425. So if you're looking at retiring with $500,000 in your IRA or 401k, you're looking at roughly 5 times the amount of savings as some of your peers. 5 times the median, and still not enough. That should tell you everything about the state of American retirement. Stay with me, because this next part changes everything, especially if you're counting on Social Security as your income backstop. I want to spend time on 2 things that most retirement conversations skip past too quickly: healthcare inflation specifically, and the Social Security math. Because these 2 forces are not the problems you think they are. You think the problem is that you didn't save enough. The real problem is that your retirement has a guaranteed cost escalation built into it, that your savings number was never designed to handle. Between 1935 and 2026, medical care experienced an average inflation rate of 4.56% per year. General CPI over the same general era averaged around 3.56%. So healthcare has been inflating at roughly 1 full percentage point faster than everything else, consistently, for 90 years. That doesn't sound like much, 1 percentage point. But compounded over 30 years of retirement, the amount of time someone retiring at 65 might need to fund. And that difference becomes catastrophic for a fixed portfolio. Here's a concrete version. Imagine you retire with your $500,000. In year 1, your healthcare costs are $8,000, which is actually on the low end. But we'll be generous. At 4.56% annual inflation, year 2, that's $8,365. Year 10, it's $12,000. Year 20, it's $18,500. Year 30, $28,000. In your final decade of retirement, healthcare alone for one person might cost more than your entire annual withdrawal from your portfolio. Bureau of Economic Analysis data shows that annualized housing services spending hit $3.95 trillion in May 2026, and healthcare reached $3.716 trillion, a year-over-year jump of $203.9 billion. Healthcare is the category most likely to grow faster than a retiree's income, and the least responsive to belt tightening. You can choose not to travel. You cannot choose not to have a heart attack. You cannot negotiate cancer down to a lower price point. And now we get to the part of this video that I genuinely didn't want to find when I went looking for it: Social Security. Under current law, the Social Security Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund will be depleted in 2032. Not maybe, not possibly. Currently projected to be depleted in 2032. When that happens, incoming payroll tax revenue will cover only about 78% of scheduled benefits, triggering an automatic reduction of roughly 22% for retirees, survivors, and dependents. To put that in concrete terms, the average recipient is looking at a monthly benefit cut of around $500 if Congress does nothing between now and then. $500 a month, gone, automatically, by law, with no action required by anyone. Current law does not require Congress to act in order for benefits to be cut. It requires Congress to act in order for cuts to be prevented. If the trust fund hits zero and lawmakers have done nothing, the Social Security Administration will begin paying only what incoming payroll taxes can support pro rata to every eligible recipient. The average monthly retirement benefit for 2026 was projected to be $2,071 following the announcement of the 2.8% cost of living adjustment for the year. Cut that by 22% and you're at $1,615 a month, $19,380 a year. That's what the guaranteed income backstop actually looks like. If Congress stays true to its historical pattern of debating Social Security until the very last possible second, Maybe they fix it. They fixed it in 1983. But 1983 was 43 years ago. And what's concerning, as a bipartisan policy center analyst put it, is that we've known about this problem for several decades, and Congress has not done anything to address it. Congress has known about this for decades and has done nothing. The senators elected in November will still be in office when the trust fund runs out. To be fair, they'll probably also be collecting Social Security. So go back to David's math. Remove $500 a month from his Social Security projection. His retirement income just dropped to $38,840 a year. His annual gap with actual spending, $23,000. His 30-year shortfall, $690,000. He doesn't have $690,000 in reserve. He has $500,000 total. Now, there's something important I need to tell you, because this is exactly the moment where the conversation usually turns into a pitch to buy an annuity or hire a financial advisor. I don't do that. What I did instead is build something for myself and then made it available to anyone who wants it. Here's the part that never makes it into a standard retirement calculator. The retirement math isn't just about your savings number. It's about the sequence when you retire, what the market does in your first 3 years, how you handle healthcare costs before Medicare kicks in at 65, how you decide to take Social Security, and whether your withdrawal rate is actually designed for a 40-year retirement or a 30-year one. I had all this data sitting in front of me from running my own numbers, and I realized it wasn't anywhere in a format that was actually usable. So I built the Exit Code. It's a digital book, 8 chapters of pure research, no filler, built around 50 years of retirement data, and distilled into a mathematical framework that turns maybe someday into a specific date. 2 of the things I focus on most in it are directly relevant to what we just talked about. The first is what I call the 4% trap, why the standard 4% rule understates your actual risk and what a dynamic withdrawal method looks like instead. The second is the Social Security Bridge strategy, which is how you structure your withdrawals to wait until age 70 for maximum benefits without going broke in the meantime. Waiting until 70 increases your Social Security benefit by roughly 76% compared to claiming at 62. Almost no one does it. Almost no one knows exactly how to fund the gap in the years between early retirement and 70 without cannibalizing their portfolio. That's what the bridge strategy is for. You can get the Exit Code through the link in the description for less than 1 hour with a mediocre financial advisor who will tell you to max your 401k and come back in 6 months. Now, back to why $500,000 has the same retirement energy as $200,000 20 years ago. Because we haven't talked about the 4% rule yet. And this is where the math gets ugly fast. Financial planner William Bengen introduced the rule in 1994 after crunching decades of historical market data. He wanted to find the highest withdrawal rate that would have survived even the worst market conditions of the 20th century, including the Great Depression and the brutal 1970s. The answer he landed on was about 4%, and the figure stuck so firmly that it became gospel. Here's the problem with gospel. The world changed, and the gospel didn't. Morningstar's State of Retirement Income Report found that 3.9% is the highest safe starting withdrawal rate for new retirees. That figure assumes a 40% stock and 60% bond portfolio, a 30-year time horizon, and a 90% probability of not running out of money. 3.9, not 4, and that's a safe number. If you retire at 60 and live to 93, entirely plausible, now you're looking at a 33-year retirement. Over 50 years, a 4% withdrawal has a roughly 15% failure rate historically. Dropping to 3.3% pushes success above 95%. So let's do the uncomfortable math. 4% of $500,000. That's $20,000 a year. Before taxes on a traditional 401k withdrawal, let's say you're in the 22% tax bracket. Your actual net is $15,600 per year, $1,300 a month from your portfolio. You know what that is? That's less than the average Social Security check. That's slightly more than the average monthly grocery bill for a retired couple. That is not a retirement income. That is a supplement to a retirement income that you don't have yet. If you apply a 4% withdrawal rate to $500,000, you get an annual income of $20,000, not accounting for inflation-related adjustments. But chances are you have at least some Social Security on top of that. At least some. That's the official hedging language. Add in the average Social Security benefit, $2,071 per month, as currently projected, and you're at $44,852 a year gross, which sounds almost okay until you look at what a typical retired household actually spends. The Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey puts average annual household spending at $78,535 in 2024. A $40,000 withdrawal covers roughly half of what a typical household actually spends in a year. Retirees spend less than working households on commuting and child-related costs, but they spend more on healthcare, which largely closes that gap. Honey, I thought retiring would mean fewer expenses. Maybe, but also new hip, 2 medications, dental work that Medicare doesn't cover, and we should probably get that roof looked at. The spending doesn't go away. It changes address. This is also where I want to address the person watching this who is thinking, okay, but I've got the house, the kids are out, my spending is way under average. Fair. Some people genuinely do retire on less. But here's the asymmetry. You can plan to spend $60,000 a year. You cannot plan to stay healthy. You cannot plan to not need a home health aide at 81. You cannot plan for your spouse to not need memory care. Those costs aren't optional. And Allianz Life's 2026 annual retirement study, released April 23rd, found that 67% of Americans now fear running out of money more than they fear dying. 67% would rather die than outlive their savings. That's not hyperbole. That's people who have run the numbers and understood the math well enough to know what the alternative looks like. A majority of retirees, 51%, say they have no plan if their retirement savings run out, and 43% say they would prefer to die than have that happen. I find the absurdity in a lot of financial systems. I genuinely do. But that statistic I don't find funny. Here's the final layer of this argument, and this one is the one most people miss entirely, because it's not about inflation, it's not about healthcare costs, and it's not about Social Security. It's about your brain. The number $500,000 is a big number. Your brain knows this. It has always known this. When you were 25 years old, thinking about what 50 years old would look like, $500,000 was the number on the poster in your head. It was the rich person number. It was the made it number. And now you're approaching it or at it, and something in your neurology is doing a small celebration, a little release of dopamine at the sight of a number that matches the thing you've always associated with safety. The problem is that the poster in your head was printed in 1999 or 2005 or whatever year you first started imagining what financial safety looked like. The number 500,000 hasn't changed in your imagination, but the world has added 66% to the price of everything since 2006, has inflated the retirement magic number to $1.46 million. A $200,000 jump from just 1 year ago, and is now threatening to cut the Social Security backstop you were counting on by 22%. You think you're done measuring. You're not. The yardstick says 500,000. The wall says 1.46 million. The gap between them is not a savings problem. It's a perception problem on top of a savings problem. Here's a study worth sitting with. 46% of Americans say they don't expect to be financially prepared for retirement, and nearly half, 48%, believe it is somewhat or very likely they will outlive their savings. Nearly half the people who are saving, who are planning, who are watching videos like this one, believe they will live longer than their money. That is not ignorance. That is people who have done the math and arrived at an honest conclusion. And the conclusion is, the ruler they've been using for 20 years is the wrong size for the wall they're trying to measure. Let me bring David back. David and his champagne emoji. He sat with the numbers for a few weeks. His original plan was to retire at 62. At 62, he'd be taking Social Security early, a reduction of about 30% from his full retirement age benefit. His $500,000 at 3.9% withdrawal to stay safe gives him $19,500 a year from the portfolio. Social Security early at 30% reduced, about $17,300 a year, total $36,800 per year. His actual household spending with a paid-off house, but healthcare for $58,000 a year, he's $21,200 short every year. David is not going to retire at 62. He pushed it to 65. He's going to work 3 more years, let his balance compound a bit more, and let Social Security get less penalized. And he's going to accept that retirement for him at 65 with $580,000 saved. And full Social Security is a livable but tight budget. Not the poster in his head, a different poster, a more honest one. Here are 3 takeaways from this video that are specific to this situation, not generic advice, but calibrated directly to the broken ruler problem. First, stop measuring your retirement readiness as a raw dollar number. The number is meaningless without the ratio. 500,000 sounds like a lot until you divide it by 1.46 million. The current stated retirement target from Northwestern Mutual's study of 4,375 Americans, you're at 34%. That ratio should be your North Star, not the dollar figure. Second, run your healthcare inflation separately. The general CPI tells you your grocery bill is up 2.57% per year on average. It does not tell you your healthcare bill is up 4.56% per year. Build a separate line in your retirement model for healthcare costs that escalates at a different rate. If you don't have a model, Bengen himself has called inflation retirees' greatest enemy. For exactly this reason, a few bad inflation years early in retirement can do lasting damage to a portfolio. Healthcare is not a few bad inflation years. It's every year, reliably, relentlessly. Third, price the Social Security delay. According to a report from the Penn-Wharton budget model, Social Security's Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund is on track to run dry by 2032. Without congressional action, beneficiaries could face cuts of up to 22% in their payments. Waiting until age 70 to claim maximizes your benefit. That's a mathematical advantage of roughly 76% compared to claiming at 62. But it requires a bridge strategy, a way to fund the gap years without destroying your portfolio. Building that bridge is the most underrated move in retirement planning, and it almost never makes it into the standard 401k conversation. The 4% rule was written in 1994. The retirement target has roughly tripled since most of us first heard the word retirement savings. The healthcare bill is now $15,474 per person per year, and climbing. Social Security is scheduled to be depleted by 2032. And the median American walks into retirement with $87,000. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. But even lazy investing only works if you're measuring the right wall with the right ruler. The number $500,000 isn't a retirement number in 2026. It's a starting point for figuring out what your actual retirement number is and then building a system to get there before the desert runs out of water. End of script, 5,174 words.